Thank you for joining the Planning Commission for the special workshop on land use for the city's 2045 comprehensive plan. My name is Lindsay Zabel. I am the Community and Economic Development Director for the city of Sequim. And I'm really excited to see what we learned from you guys tonight. We have with us Bill Grimes. He is the project manager with SCJ Alliance, who is supporting the city in our major periodic update for the comprehensive plan. And he will lead you on the agenda for this evening and the work program workshop that will be undertaking and the outreach and feedback that we'll be sharing before the end of this. So with that, thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Lindsay. We also have Jeff Levy with SCJ. He's working with us on the project. We have Emily Kohler with the city, and Travis also in the city. And so the five of us, including Lindsay, will be walking around and helping facilitate the workshop activity this evening. So when you see us, flag us down if you need us. And I'll be wandering around. We don't have a mic, so I'll just be wandering around between the tables and talking to make sure that we can have a conversation here. We have a signage sheet. Those of you who haven't already done it, please do. It's back here on one of the tables. That signage sheet will give us your email address so that we can keep you updated with this process as it continues. And I'll talk a little bit about the process here in just a second. Actually, let's go ahead and kick it off, Jeff. Okay, so where are we in this process? The city of Sequim, actually every jurisdiction in the state of Washington is required to do a periodic update of its comprehensive plan. Sequim is one community of hundreds who have to have them done by the end of next year. 2025, we have to have the update done. So we've been working on this process now for about 7 months. And we've concentrated really on getting a good understanding of some of the demographics and some of the influences working on Sequim. And then in June, I see some familiar faces here in the room, but in June we had a 3-day studio here in this room where we were talking about community vision and where we wanted to be for the year 2045. Now, Sequim lands updated its comprehensive plan 10 years ago. So we're right on schedule, needing to do the 10-year periodic update now. Jeff reminded me earlier that this is probably a good time for me to talk a little bit about what a comprehensive plan is. It's something that sets policy for the next 20 years. It's not something that's setting rules for decisions today necessarily. It's something that helps us understand the context that we want to be living in 20 years. Now, it gives suggestions on what kinds of rules we might want to put in place to get there. But it also talks about investing in our capital facilities. It talks about our transportation systems. It talks about our land use arrangements. It talks about economic development and what we want to conceive as a long-term strategy for this community. So it's a very high-level, comprehensive look at the future. So, I mean, if there are specific rules that are on your mind, we can always put those into the process because there are probably reasons why those rules might be on your mind. And that's the kind of stuff that influences the policy that we consider adopting. Okay, so anyway, comprehensive plan, it's basically an attitude statement, and it's something that helps us understand that desired context for the year 2045. All right. Now the city will be, and I'll get into this, the city will be working on an update to its zoning and subdivision regulations, but that'll be after we get the comprehensive plan done. It's a plan first, then a zone. So anyway, we'll go through this comprehensive plan and then we'll come back to zoning. So we are looking also at transportation elements. The city has hired Transpo, another consultant, to work on a transportation master plan. We're coordinating with them so that the technical bits and pieces of that transportation planning are reflected in the policy that we develop for the comprehensive plan. So it's a very important functional plan, and we have to make sure we coordinate with them on that. We're also looking at climate action policy. This is another requirement under the Growth Management Act. Boy, it got massively changed over the last 2 years. but it requires us to look at climate resilience and climate impact in the policies that we adopt. So we're also auditing the city's existing policies to make sure we understand what climate impact might be. And as I mentioned before, we're also looking at revising the zoning and the subdivision regulations, as well as the city's administrative procedures and critical areas ordinances. That might sound kind of wonky, it is, but it's the rules that implement the policy direction from the comprehensive plan. So that'll follow later on. Right now, we are solidly at step 2, where we are considering our options on how we envision Sequim's overall community forum and what it might be like 20 years from now. Okay, next slide, please. So we have a project website, squimagine.org. That's an easy one to remember. Squimagine.org. And we have some opportunities to learn more about the process and the project, and also to get involved, giving us some feedback. We had our storefront studio here at Guy Cole in June. There were also appearances. Staff was at farmers markets to get some ideas and thoughts from the community. And then we're going to continue having events like this. I think we have another 2 or 3 community workshops that we'll have. It'll go to the planning commission and then the city council for adoption. Again, I'm trying to get it done by the end of next year. Jeff, please. Thank you. So I mentioned that Growth Management Act has changed significantly over the last couple of years. The Department of Commerce, who's the steward of the Growth Management Act, has put together a checklist that we go through to make sure that we understand what the law now requires us to do. And we compare our existing policy and our development regulations to that checklist. So that is really the minimum bar we have to clear, is that we have to make sure that we comply with the Growth Management Act to make sure that we have a solid, defensible, and legal plan. So that's our first step. But that's also, we can do better than that. And so that's one of the reasons why we're running this process, is that this gives us an opportunity to advance the priorities that the community believes need to be advanced, even though it may not necessarily be a GMA compliance issue. As long as we satisfy that compliance, we're good. But that doesn't necessarily give us the avenue to put in place policies that will help us achieve character in the future, the vision of Sequim that we're looking for here. So we have things that we have to do, and we have things we may want to do. And so we're going to blend those together as part of this process. Our studio, middle of June. They're always different when we go to community studios. Our workshop attendance at the studios was pretty good. But I think really what was wonderful about the studio is that we had 3 days where we were planted in this room. And we had hundreds of people coming in and talking to us one-on-one, engaging in various exercises that we had there. And we took in a lot of information. We had something that we call our mini poll. I'll talk about that in a little bit. We have our penny poll, where we're asking people to play like they were city council people and investing in certain priorities. Every decision was a good one, but we still had a scarce set of resources that you can invest across all these different priorities. So it helps us understand the relative value of different very important community considerations. So that was really a good one. We also had our targeting exercise where we asked people to let us know if they thought that the policies we have adopted today are doing a good job. And if they're doing a good job, boy, put that dot right in the bullseye. And there were some policies where, and we had a summary of the policies we wanted to test. And some of them were really right on target. But some people were thinking maybe, oh, this policy is a little too ambitious, or maybe this policy is being a little too complacent. And so we were able to develop something of a lens to look at the existing city policy framework. And then we had our first workshop where we took the vision that Sequim has today, and we asked people to examine the little snippets, the statements, the assertions that that vision statement made, and see if they're relevant today still, because it was written 10 years ago. Maybe there were things that were important in 2014 that aren't necessarily as important today. And then if they needed to be adjusted in some way. And so all of this pre-work in the first 2 days of the studio led us to our workshop at the end of the studio, Jeff?
It's gonna be protected.
I'm really wishing some of the communities
I like that.
shake it.
I still have some of those friends, but yeah, those are.
So this is the mini poll. And what we needed to do is that we needed to figure out how people would address potentially conflicting policy direction on important topics for this community. So we call it a butterfly format, where we ask people on a topic to say, should the city do one thing, or should the city do something that's essentially diametrically opposed? And if any of you are interested, I think we have this online too. So if any of you haven't done it, you're interested in doing it, please take a shot at it. Like the first line is talking about downtown split. Let's take this one as an example. We said downtown is basically okay the way that it is versus we really still need to focus on downtown as a target of our city policy. And so you can see where people were tending to go, yes, more toward the right, looking at making sure that we're paying attention to downtown. When we were looking at the second line, more should be done to make Sequim a place to raise a family, or Sequim's future relies on its ability to return to serve retirees. You can see how these begin to play out. It's dynamic, we're exercising these different topics. People were saying, yes, we're okay on the retiree front, but we really need to figure out how to make this place more habitable for our families and young professionals. So anyway, so we were reusing these various exercises to try to zone in on what we believe would be the fundamental community values that our plan has to respect and advance. So go ahead, Jeff, one more time. And we also had opportunities for plenty of open-ended comments. We had our graffiti wall, which was a big piece of butcher paper on the back wall, and people wrote scores of comments on that graffiti wall. Some people were even sketching out different ideas they wanted to do, different diagrams that they wanted to make sure that our plan really pays attention to. Okay, next one, please. And then what came out of this was a general agreement on these 7 values that we used as the core of our final workshop at the studio. So preserve rural and open spaces, essential to the community's identity in the conversations we had. Promote housing affordability. Most everybody talked about how tough it is to find an affordable housing solution here that you like. Conserve regional water resources. Prioritize transportation safety and comfort. Promote economic opportunity. Attract and retain families, and ensure fiscal responsibility. Okay, who can argue with this? But these are things that came out of that conversation. There were other things that didn't necessarily make it onto this list. Okay. When we had our studio, we were also doing it within the context of other engagement that's going on. Last year, the city had a community survey about what are the things that in your view are most important for the community. And one of the resounding responses was we need to get serious about our land use policy and the way that we implement the rules that we've got. So I wanted vision, implementation, accountability related to land use policy and development. That's important. So we saw that as an opportunity, really as permission to maybe be enthusiastic about this process, because this really is an instrument for attaining something that the community really seems to want. We had the penny poll, again, that reinforced that desire for a rural setting as an identity defining component, mixing families and retirees, and reestablishing the importance of downtown Sequim. And then again, our graffiti wall, people were really talking housing, talking about parks. We didn't really have a lot of conversation about parks in our studio, but it's important to folks here in Sequim. And then also how we might be dealing with the water resource. Okay. So when we were doing that work for the studio, we asked participants in the final workshop to take a look at 3 different philosophical approaches to the way that we manage Sequim's development over the next 20 years. One was, we are going to go all in on resilience. We're going to recognize that whatever the cause, our climate is changing. And they're putting new forces on our systems and our economy that we need to figure out how to adapt to. So one philosophy was resilience. Pay attention to natural ecological functions and use those as a baseline for basically every decision we make. Another philosophical direction was prosperity. Really, cities are, by their nature, economic machines. And we need to make sure that we have an economic strategy that employs people, that serves people, that keeps people safe. That our priority really is to maintain the economic and fiscal integrity of this community. Every decision we make has to fit that route. And then the third scenario that we were looking at was family friendliness. Let's be as diverse, age-wise, diverse economically, diverse socially as we can be. We want to make sure that we have youth in this community who will grow and stay and become our elders. We want to nurture that kind of social capacity that we have in a family-friendly scenario, when every decision that we make has to fit that set of priorities. Now, who can agree with any, or who can disagree with any of those? So but if you play out each one to its extreme, it actually works to some degree to the exclusion of the other two. And so what we ask people to do is to consider those three different philosophies within the context of those 7 values and see how they might maybe choose a favorite. Well, we didn't expect anybody would choose one favorite, but the tables were figuring out ways that they could blend these priorities in a way that made a certain amount of sense. And somewhat to our surprise, people were telling us that resilience and family friendliness basically emerged as the top priorities. And if we do that right, prosperity will be the result. So we've gone through the results of that worksheet. And we've now come back to you tonight with a set of 3 much more specific land use scenarios that we think respect that context of that blending that came out of that earlier conversation, but have distinctly different impacts on the city form. And that's what we're going to get at tonight. So we have the first impact, and it's on the worksheet. The first scenario is what we're calling status quo. And that's a little bit of a misnomer. It doesn't necessarily result in a change to our land use designation, but it actually might result in some changes to the way that our residential areas develop, just because of the way the laws have changed in the state. It's one that doesn't rock the boat much. Not proposing much in the way of change. What it does do is that it repeats the pattern that we've established for the next 20 years. And you can probably think, yeah, that's a great thing. And then you might also think, maybe that's a little bit, maybe we don't need more of a good thing. Maybe we need to do something a little bit different. So some of the outcomes of a status quo type of an approach is that it will probably put more pressure on developing in the periphery into those areas, we call them greenfields, that aren't already developed. Which means we're extending water and transportation infrastructure to serve those areas on the periphery. One of the things that I have not yet mentioned is that a change in the Growth Management Act requires us to allow for quite a large proportion of new housing developed in Sequim to serve low and extremely low income households. And that might be 200 or 300 units between now and the year 2045. So we have to allow for these units to be developed. Now, in a status quo situation, that might be a little challenging because our densities are low. Okay, so anyways, that's status quo. Some images of what status quo might result in. I mentioned there could be changes in the residential landscape. We have to permit at least 2 units per residential parcel now because of growth management. Yes.
Could you turn on some of these lights so we can see the screen better?
Sure. You won't be able to see me as well. I know we can turn off the center.
This one? The center's off, he had said.
No. There's a switch over there. Lindsay, is that it? Sorry about that. I thought we had our full control over that. Ah, perfect. So even though our zoning may say single family residential, people have a choice whether they're gonna put 1 or 2 units on those parcels. And so we might have a little bit of an increase in residential intensity. Here are some examples of where it's been done fairly nicely. It's cottage homes, or it's accessory dwelling units. So you get a sense of what some of our neighborhoods might look like, even, you know, with some change, even with the status quo option. Okay, Jeff. Thank you. The second one is downtown emphasis. You're probably familiar, many of you, that we have a downtown plan that calls for a certain increase of development intensity downtown, but it's really very measured. What it calls for is essentially leaving Washington Street pretty much as it is, and then pushing development intensity a half block south and north of Washington. So we have bigger buildings. To see some of that taking shape on the south side of Washington, between Washington and the freeway. Not so much yet on the north side. The downtown plan also calls for the preservation of the manufactured home communities there, so we still have that flavor as part of the downtown identity. What this plan does, what this scenario would do, is say, okay, we're actually going to build downtown up a little bit more than what our downtown plan envisioned. Yes, we'll still keep the manufactured home communities the same way, and we'll still look at Main Street in the same way, because that was really an important fundamental principle of the downtown plan. But hey, maybe a 4 or 5 story mixed use or apartment building downtown, maybe that fits. And if our priorities are to make downtown a prosperous retail compact district where people can reasonably get around on foot or on a bike in a compact place, you know, maybe that's an option we need to look at. Another thing that that particular option does is that it does not it allows for development to be concentrated in an area where we already have infrastructure to support it. Another thing that does is that it provides for specific housing types, condominiums, townhouses, stacked flats, apartment buildings, that are more compatible with our need to produce units for lower income households without necessarily changing the character or the feel of the place. So anyway, so that's one. Yes, sir, question.
Well, you just said you go 4 or 5 story building in downtown, you already have the infrastructure built in place to support it. You don't have the parking.
Well, yes, you're right. You don't have the parking, and that's one of those thresholds that you really look at, is that what level of intensity do you need where maybe a household can have only 1 car and not 2? Or maybe a car and a bike or a motorcycle, where you have, what it does is it places more.
Residents that would live in that area, but what about people that don't live in that area? Down there, do shopping, you don't have parking to support that.
Yeah, and I think that's a consideration. You know, if we're still in a place where a lot of folks are driving cars, which may be realistic, you know, how do we balance that? So, I don't know that we have the economics yet to support a parking structure, but we may in 20 years. Remember, we're looking a long time. Yes, sir.
What are you considering now?
Well, we've got some general boxes here, but it basically, in this diagram, it extends south from Fur, all the way to just about to Freeway Energy. So, and I'm not saying it's a uniform mass. We actually have something of a little diagram here that shows on the bottom row. You may not be able to see it, so I'm standing in the way. But it's supposed to be a representation of what the intensity might be in those areas. You can see that it is something of a ziggurat shape coming up highest in the area that would be essentially Sequim Avenue. Okay, let's just get some representative images there. You've probably seen small town downtowns that are developed more intensely than Sequim's is. These are some images that begin to relate what some of that might look like. Where some of the buildings do have retail storefronts in them with some residential units above. There are opportunities for community open space, and maybe gatherings are happening in these places. And still also an opportunity to build into it some of the existing character that's shown here in the lower left. So representational of what that option might look like. The third scenario is what we're calling Washington Corridor. And this is saying, okay, we're going to try to stem outward development pressure. We also don't want to change the downtown plan. That land use policy is essentially okay, but we still need to provide for new housing units. This gives us an opportunity to inject a new type of development into Sequim that would be scattered along Washington Street corridor at intervals. And so actually right out here, the QFC shopping center. We don't know what's going to happen to QFC over the next decade. But some of these centers that we have in Sequim are struggling with vacancy rates and changes in the retail market. This option gives us an opportunity to look at a different way of managing some of those sites into the future. It wouldn't necessarily all have to transform at the same time. It could happen over time. But it does give us an opportunity to take a look at what this type of, we call them nodes, might actually look like as they develop over time. So, Jeff. Lifestyle centers, right? Small scale, open spaces, promenade types of things, but still also with a mix of retail and housing units in there that allow for a variety of housing types that also help us meet some of our lower income housing targets without having an impact on the rest of the community. So go ahead, Jeff. So what we're going to ask you to do is use this worksheet, and we'll turn up the lights at this time. We'll be asking you to do the classic strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats exercise on the thing. So next slide, please, Jeff. So we're going to ask you to take a look at scenario A. Next slide, please. B and C, or 1, 2, 3. Sorry about that. And just learn a little bit more about them. Discuss them within your groups, just so you have an agreed upon concept of what each one of these things represents. Okay, next slide, please. And then we're going to ask you to take a look at each one for its strengths. What about this really sounds good? Where is this strong option? Talk about its weaknesses. Gee, the concept here is weak because it may not provide enough parking for downtown. So those are basically looking at today. What are its strengths and weaknesses today? And then you're going to take a look at its opportunities, thinking about, wow, in a few years, this could actually promise something very cool. And then maybe when you're looking at your threats, you say, oh, it's going to put something at risk. If we go here, we're going to lose something. Or it's not going to work because we're not going to be able to afford it for something different.
Are there any plans for there to be a hospital in Sequim within the next 10 years?
Not that I'm aware of.
Really?
Not that I'm aware of, but there might be things going on that I don't know.
I have a question.
You have staff resources who may be able to answer that question accurately and well. Yes.
In the same paper that this meeting came out, there was something at the bottom of we're still conserving water. That we're supposed to still be conserving water. When I addressed this issue to, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the person, but I thought it was perhaps the person in charge of it in town. We live behind Safeway, and there's this green belt behind Safeway that they are automatically watering. And they're also automatically watering in front of them. And the reply I got was, Sequim doesn't have to worry about drought because we have very deep wells. And basically Safeway pays for this water.
Hmm.
Now, I'm sorry, but I don't care how deep your wells are at this current moment. But there is a drastic water shortage all over this country. And to be told that it was okay to water something that doesn't really need watering because they pay for it, seemed to me not sustainable.
Right, and this is a fine example of an issue that isn't necessarily right on the worksheet, but it's important to think about. So what I would say is when we get into the group conversations, and other people may have concerns similar to yours, to write it down in the next 3 slides. Bingo, next one, right, you have a box there in the lower right corner that is a free-for-all opportunity where you can note other issues that we need to make sure we consider. And so, yes, okay, so someone pays for water use, but there should be some kind of policy guidance that says, is that a good idea or not? And so the comprehensive plan gives you an opportunity to do that. Okay, so, there are the 5 of us who'll be walking around. You each have, I believe, a planning commissioner at your table, who can help facilitate the conversation. So consider us as additional resources here. And we need to get into the exercise, so I'll chase you down for that. And then, so we're gonna take 50 minutes to go through this, so we have an opportunity to have report out, so we're done.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, there we go.
Right, I know. No, that's the word today.
Automatic.
Probably not at this stage. That would be. So that would, so since that was something that we shared, let's say that that was still, kind of a, that it might have been that those really smart nature, there would be. Yeah, oh, sure. So, as of the last, I asked about at that point, now that piece of property has been designated as All right. So action is, so in order for that I think it's a little bit. I'm not 100%. At this point, when I further out
It's not what I think of, maybe it's there. And the others are.
Well. More limited supplies, well, that's just recently, conservation plan, been in the plan about 10 years. Is with that as well, that is enough water to stay in this they're estimating 20 years based on so there also is, where is it? It's underneath the Little League field, right off the River Road. Yeah. Well, there is a secondary water source that needs to be not happening right now, which is actually, I don't have the exact numbers. Matt would be a good one, but it's based on what, you know. But there's,
They will tell us, it's part of. Water bill. Yeah, yeah.
One of the things that Travis said, I was understand on the rules that, like, a subdivision wants to be built, you know, 100 houses, 200 houses, or resort. The developer is required to build infrastructure. So they can tell you about houses.
I've seen that. Right now. But still.
Questions on that before we get Exactly. This isn't, you know, we're not making, we're just.
Yeah.
You know, what you guys
Yeah.
how do you feel the status quo of the is always how we build, what we build. Are we looking at maybe concentrating that building to or the downtown core and maybe essentially what I got to think is it's really spread out. Or are they going to be a combination of okay, so yeah, we said right, right. So let's look at the strength of the, so we'll touch on these really quick and then we'll go into like a hybrid and you're all. So let's say that we decide that we're gonna continue developing the same way that we are.
Infrastructure. What's going on right now? Start businesses. Coming around and down.
Yeah.
Sewers, roads. Although the roads can also be negative downtown.
Right.
I love the Saturday market.
Yeah. Right, right. So it's. Okay. Okay. So the infrastructure's already in place, be more cost effective because we're looking at reinventing. What would be another strength of continuing the way that we're? Well, I think we can.
Here, I don't see a whole lot of changes downtown. Downtown is at 1920s.
Right.
You know, that's, it's quaint, and that's, you know, part of strength right there.
Right. Right.
Will consider the buy.
Right.
just not a salary for them, it's just- Right. Oh, we're just.
Right. So that would be, maybe a business take away. Or, well, yeah, so what would a weakness be? So we'll get that. Yeah, what would be a weakness about just continuing what we're doing?
From an infrastructure standpoint, yes, I've been involved in a couple of building projects. And I was a teacher. They said, you build a new building, it's way cheaper than you bought it. You're trying to put it in infrastructure, internet, they did talk about sprinklers, fire requirements, and all of that. So I would see, retrofit.
Retrofit, buildings are expensive. Okay. You have something?
Well, it's all gonna go through this council, so you are participating in. Well, if the plan will go and sort of weigh in. They're the ones who-
So that would be, like the development wouldn't be, like development would not be focused. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, so it wouldn't preserve, farmland / green space. So I think, okay, and, what do you think about, as far as the common down? Affordable housing or like workforce housing. Healthcare workers, we continue to do the status quo, things that would provide good, housing options. Yeah, like if there needs to be incentives for development to actually want to develop. I mean, here's a perfect example. I've got two children. Well, I have 3 children. Two of them still live in the community. My oldest son was able to purchase a home in the Sequim city limits. He was 22 years old. But no longer since then. So that was 5 years ago. And my younger son, who is 22 now, is pre-approved for a home.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But if there wasn't a door such. Okay, right. Right. Because there's, starting out. With the
Or it was independent.
Yeah, yeah. So.
Kale is my back out here. So, 2, 3, 4.
You can write.
That is
Right.
Easy.
So that might be an opportunity to say, like, if we stayed this status quo, an opportunity would be to zone change to allow. Yeah.
okay, so we got, I got.
So it would be another good opportunity. We decided we wanted to keep going the way we are. What would be a good opportunity? Would it be, you know, would it be a 4 or 5 cats, you know, accessible? Would it be creating incentives? Right? Yeah, yeah. How about like creating incentives for spread out to develop technologies? Well, if you mandate the cost. Oh, yeah, yeah, so infrastructure, so that, so to create, infrastructure. Yeah, that's a minimum requirement. And we also, to allow like a certain amount, so the developer has to develop to. So they, and so they could do sidewalks on each street. Yeah. Yeah. My first call question that I can't answer, and I just, I don't know. That's a good one then.
It does not take the property off the tax roll until they put it into a trust status, and that's the status that they're allowed to do at the federal level. It takes about 5 to 7 years to process. I do not know if they have interest in the tribe has the power. The tribe is not. I used to work for the Puyallup tribe, so I can say it that straight, that direct. I'll know that there's that. Oh, no, they have to follow the development. If they're to develop it before it's in trust, they have to follow. They can follow their own. That's, yeah, part of the agreement with. But it's not. Quite a process. That's how yeah.
Retail business. Yeah.
They get to collect, so, a good example, the gas station right off of my side. Their gas is all surveyed. If the market's nearby, should they have a property process, like, goes in the end, goes to the tribe, not to the for their gas station. So they don't charge the extra fluctuation now. So that are where they can cut it not to be competitive.
So for instance, if you go to a grocery store and you buy a sandwich and I don't know, some beer, do they have to collect sales tax on that? So not, if it is in trust, they don't have to collect sales tax. It's not trust.
They typically like their own thing. The taxes you're paying to them.
Okay. So is that the same with are they subject to lodging tax or anything or not? Is it the same?
A lodging tax.
They're not subject. It doesn't go down tax on it. Yeah, we should.
I'm sorry, but those were really good questions, you guys, so.
That things like.
Yeah, so.
Water or power charges to help balance. That's a very high level thing that can happen.
I think I'm not. So I think they're really. Provide the service.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So what would threat me? What something threats me if we continue, with just the status quo, like looking, looking down the road, 10 years, 20 years. Potentially to our new people. I work for one time I had 5 jobs. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay, so let's say that we say, we're gonna try and focus all of our, most of our efforts with development into downtown. We're gonna leave the person, we're really gonna focus on build that. So, 2 to 3 story buildings, we're gonna create something for, multi, like, retail and residential. Yeah, you can think like that.
So where are we? Reduce the need for as much transportation. You don't have to go as far.
Yeah. So reduce transportation needs. It would provide more retail choices. Okay.
I don't see it.
Right. So that would be a weakness, no parking. Okay, so that would be an opportunity, which would be free downtown. Maybe, better sidewalks. Yeah. Okay. What would be another? Down to take down. Yeah.
If you go further down Washington, There are some people that got like Pioneer Cafe and
That's okay. Right. That would be a.
I think if you're trying to treat everything to the different kind of, that's, you know, supply and demand. And then when you have the demand, the price goes up. You know, housing, and it's not just in housing, it's in business too. Renter facilities down there, price for everything we sell.
That if we just concentrate like 10, 20 years from now, what would direct you just. I mean, I don't think it would. Yeah, the development would be wonky. Yeah, oh, I lived on the east side for a long time. Just. Okay. That might be a strength where it would be like a great, downtown.
Yeah, where you have a balance in the long walk shops and restaurants. So, they need that part.
Right. So how about if we, scenario 3 is we just kind of, work on expanding. Okay. Just be downtown. We're not.
Right, because you're like, okay, I'll join the developer.
Yeah, probably down and then out. So it might be where, like, let's say, so, a lot of the businesses are downtown. And then as you get out, the areas Washington, there's a lot of residential. So if we develop the community now, it might be that there's, maybe there's a few more pockets of retail kind of mixed in. Yeah. Yes. Planning director down there for a year. So I guess then Ryan beat your shooting. So I'm at 6, and there was my own for a minute there.
So do you think that it?
Oh, I'm at 7.
Expand it out a little bit more evenly,
So.
that it would provide more opportunity for service.
Yeah, there's a hospital. There's a hospital. It's my understanding of the hospital district.
Right.
I do not think that there would be it's about a 15-year process.
Yeah.
It took 10 years to get it. I wouldn't say 10 years, but 10 years to
Okay.
occupancy. Or stadium.
Yeah.
Sites a couple of times.
So residents on outskirts will feel. Okay, so what about, would a good opportunity be that if we did move forward with this, that, be to,
Why would they down
so that it would allow.
because it's 2% here dependent. Is it an Anthony's or a? Yeah, you gotta pay them the Seattle rate.
Yeah. So more Yeah.
People. Seattle, so you got something like
Yeah, so
Right.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's what I was thinking, like, there's, you know,
no benefit in GMA now, I think they don't. City core.
Well, we are expanding, we've been expanding the sewer, I'm not sure on what the exact capacity is. but We're also
It's not a, yeah,
doing it.
yeah, and I would say that
It's on our capital planner.
the generation that I.
Yeah, to make, more efficient, so it's more efficient filtering the water, and, but I'm not sure. I think it's like a couple years now. I think that what we're doing now, right, we did our capital.
I might actually.
Something for Travis. Process. Applying for funding, grant funding, that will allow. Okay.
Time to settle on that lower right box.
$8,200, yeah. Yeah, well, a lot of people think they live in. I mean, the county, but I identify.
There's there's about 30,000 people that live in the county around. But the city, when they have the
Yes, you are right. So those people. So which one of these alternatives do you think fit would fit, or do you think? So there's one status quo where we keep going with. Two is damage control, where we focus on the damage now. And three,
I'll do it.
where we look to expand the status quo to move out.
The larger.
So, comprehensive combo. Which two would you go into?
Well, it's they are right now.
And how do you think you can make sure that that works? Like what, I mean, you know, that's what you guys are for.
Send it to the planning.
Send it to the planning.
Power.
Look, we have limited power, guys. I'm not gonna. So how do you make sure that that works? Yeah.
That's just the right way. That's just the right.
And how about, so
They're fast, no, they want the base one. It would just be a freeway. No, yeah, you're not allowed to access it.
Okay.
They have to go out and get into town.
Yeah. So anything else we have? No.
You're welcome. Thanks for calling me over. Oh, okay. So, should I get it? We should. Just kick it to me. Okay. Oh, yeah.
So I had a conversation.
Okay, so then there's. Right, okay, so more,
Yeah, I mean.
yeah. More. So. Something will come. The city council said they so this is an issue. We want to work on this. So what they did is they directed the staff to start developing a plan. So the city of Sequim came to the planning commission. We've been directed by the city council. Basically directed by the city council. The planning commission is an advisory commission to the. So if you are. No, volunteer. Oh, okay. Yeah. Right, and so then the city would come forward and they said, okay, well, these are the options that we said, well, we want you to focus on these three. And then we whittled it down to one. We wrote the code, we said, yes, you need to change this, like this. And then we finally came to something that we all voted to send it to the city. So then the city council kind of goes through the same process. You know, they say, well, this is what the planning commission has put forward, this is what they want. They think it's the council, okay, we don't like this part of the zoning, whatever, back on us. But city council then.
Yeah, I think hospital is going to be not enough people needing to work candidates. And then give a negative attitude. He didn't have to watch your
Right, or they could comment on something that they don't have the information on, you know. So I completely agree. I mean, sometimes that's kind of meeting. You feel the community that has a meeting about an issue in there. You know, and it makes me wonder if maybe they just. So one of your obstacles not to be a part of the show, up there for the and you all kind of agree that more information. No golden. Right. I think something.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all like, they're not really He has. Yeah, we're, my husband and I are calling. He's the one that kept saying to my husband, why don't you do anything? He's the only. So we. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and he wants to do things, he wants to really be innovative. Something like that. He wants to, you know, like a big house where he can like. Yeah, yeah. So. Should I do that? Go on, I will. No, actually, call me tomorrow. Yeah. And they're very. Yeah.
Cinematic.
So, yes, keep in mind.
Okay.
The only one that's too okay.
Excited. I'll let you know.
Make sure. Now is this town.
Okay, wow, time. Put your pencils down.
Yeah.
Not very more of that.
Wow, that was some intense hours of talking and everything about the baby. So, as per threat, we will ask each table to present their findings. So, if you're striving for consensus, it seems like there was a conversation, maybe most people were able to get there, that's great, but if not, that's fine. Just as you present what it is that you came up with, I would say concentrate on if you did find an alternative that you prefer, let us know about that. And then let us know maybe about some of the nuance of the conversation, some of the areas where maybe you didn't align and where you did. And please also take some time to make sure that the sheets have the notes on them that you need us to know about. That is what keeps us in line. My memory isn't as good as it used to be, so I'll need to have it in writing in order for me to take it with us tonight. So, how about table 7? You have another there, bottom where
Oh, we're table.
We actually began with the table of 4, but 3 of the ladies had to leave, unfortunately, but Kathy here was a great provider of information. Scenario 1 didn't gather much of any comments that Kathy wanted to add in here. Scenario 2, which is the downtown emphasis. Kathy mentioned that with the taller buildings, it would kind of lose our downtown character, or the small town character that we've been trying to maintain. There was I thought that there would be some traffic issues, as that gentleman mentioned earlier. Parking would be a concern. Family living, if there was higher density, taller structures, potentially families with kids, recreation would be an issue for the kids. Where would they go play? Right. And less side roads to access the downtown core. Yeah, and Kathy also mentioned as a long-term threat, with the increased traffic, related issues, there could be more frustrations and anger issues, quite frankly, when you're trying to navigate through a more dense area of town. So I think Kathy, was really leaning towards scenario 3 here. She liked the idea of the spread out, shorter building height. She made a good point about less congestion, being able to use side streets to go from one commercial node to another. And as an opportunity, there would be possibly more of an opportunity to create retail spaces that would be for everyday type uses. If you wanted to buy a shirt, pair of jeans, you could possibly go to these areas where these nodes might attract some of those more general retail type stores instead of the novelty stores that we have quite often in downtown Sequim. What about thoughts? Do you want us to run through the thoughts real quick too?
Yeah, stuff that came up is important for us to know.
Want to handle that, Kathy? Okay. Again, alternative 3 was the third alternative to this table. How can we make sure it works? Well, I think the city has a responsibility in making sure that the infrastructure is there to support those different types of nodes. What are the biggest obstacles standing in the way? Well, one of the thoughts, and this is actually a good one, residences above retail, you have kind of a potential conflict with noise, service trucks, garbage trucks, that type of thing that might be a problem for the residences located above retail services. What else should we keep in mind? Well, one is maintaining and retaining our teacher system in town for the education. And also maintain healthcare options. It's another one that was brought up that is key for our community. Anything you'd like to add, Jeff?
Well, I just feel that condensing a lot of, living areas in the downtown area could really make it be a lot of congestion, and that is one of my biggest concerns. You know, you gotta make do with what we got.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, how about number 5? Well, I think so.
Table 5 also selected scenario 3 as our preferred option. With all due respect to previous planning group, scenario 1 doesn't seem like it's going to function very well for the future. We're going to end up with a lot of sprawl. We like that idea. We like the idea of we need to concentrate some of the density. We felt that number 2 was a little too much of an urban feel for us. And I think that's similar to what table 7 said. So all due respect, we agree with you there. I think we're all on the same page with that. What we liked about scenario 3 was it gave us the opportunity to keep a somewhat rural feel. There's space between the little pods. So we liked that idea a lot. We were very concerned that wherever the higher density goes, we'd like to see the city consider walkability, bicycle paths, and that kind of zoning, maybe even, changing some of the street structures. There was a comment about some of the newer developments down at the far end, the sidewalks are more path-like than straight. So we'd like to see some of that put in. We think that transportation corridors are going to be a big issue to make sure that it works. We see an obstacle standing in the way are the existing businesses that are already licensed and in place. We recognize this isn't going to happen overnight. This is going to be something that takes time. What else should we keep in mind? I think I did hear medical. And a big part of that medical is more staffing, right? And so that's the housing piece, and that's how we're connecting it that way. We also want the city to keep in mind the location of the schools and where they're at, and try to have the kids near the school. So we think that works best with the number 3, right? Keep them kind of close to the school districts, and then keep our green spaces. I think that's, is there anything else that I missed? I had the smallest table, but the most passionate table. Thank you. Now, the other thing we do, and the comment was made by an Augusta gentleman over here earlier, we are concerned about parking. And maybe zoning something that has to be a parking structure or something in the future is gonna be a challenge for this growth. That's all we have.
All right, thank you very much. All right, I'm liking the systems thinking, kind of looking beyond the easy answer here. Okay, how about table 4?
What about 6?
We'll get there.
So, table 4. When we looked at the first one, 25 years ago, and, 2019, we could have first seen what's gonna happen all but, so we do feel that it'd be a little bit kind of become a little reactive and for us to say proactive. Options 2 and 3 look like better with that. Option 1 does allow for a little more modular growth. Parking would be an issue. Pushing the way to the floor might be an issue. Failure to attract and retain professionals, that's kind of a common theme, both with 1 and 2. A lot of our experience in the past, you have a younger generation leaving to seek out these careers. But we're seeing across the board, whether it be nonprofits, businesses alike, we're starting to get those professions back in. So because it's a current issue, we don't feel that option 1 really gave us solutions to some of those current issues. Option 2 may increase tourism a little bit. It's also putting a little bit more of your eggs in one basket. There's not a lot of diversity going on because the big focus is right in one small area. Walkability could be nice. Opportunity for nightlife restaurants, things like that could be good. However, when we kind of emergency operations side of the house, there's a little bit more issues there with everything right there in the center. And we'll also kind of lose a little bit of charm of the downtown. If we're looking at really bolstering that area, putting improvements there, what's going to be lost with that? When we do look at option 3, that did spread it out the most. It allowed us to kind of solve certain problems such as parking, for example, to say, well, if we look at the parking lot where, Postal is, which I've been for 6 years, and then you look where JCPenney's is. If we had policies in place that attracted different investors, that could be a part of the plan that would be required by them as okay, investors, what is your plan if you're going to do this in this area? So some areas that we're seeing struggle and not do as well. Opening up opportunity to outside investors might be the way to solve those in different areas. It seems like it allows a little bit more diversity and economic growth because you can have these areas naturally grow as they need to. And I love the fact that Costco's here, but I don't want Costco downtown. So again, let's spread out Toronto. Let's let areas grow the way that they're naturally growing. And what else do we have on that? Option 3, not as walkable. So honestly, if you wanted to go downtown, you have family in town, let's go check out a restaurant. Well, those restaurants spread out, and if you're going to a restaurant down on one end of town, you're not going to be walking by small mom and pop businesses that actually really do bring about. However, option 3 does seem like it's fluid enough to lessen those signatures it goes. And also, we kind of felt that option 3 allowed for more of a positive population growth that, let's say, could be of a younger generation, more professional generation, or even it's going to school, without losing the troublesome things that we do like about the retirement. We don't want to change the focus to say we're just this, we're just that. This would seem to allow us to hit all those things. Our thoughts at the end, how do we make this work? A little bit of a hybrid seems like a good way. Having balanced growth and making sure that we actually do have the infrastructure working parallel with these areas. You can't just have massive growth without the infrastructure. Making sure that we have enforceability and support functions that can grow with it, and making sure that those support functions we plan what we want, it's great you guys doing it, but making sure that those support functions are keeping in line with that to keep one area from getting at it and or going the other. And then it was also brought up that losing some views might be a little bit of a concern. And option 3 did seem like a decent way to do that, instead of big heavy one spot. But again, all this only works if over the next 25 years, we continue to work on this plan on a well thought out, long view, and of course, this is not what we're gonna do in the next 3 to 5 years. To get it done.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, this is brilliant. We gave you a land use transportation assignment. But you're looking past it. And I really appreciate that ability to have that abstract interconnectedness and interdependence. Recognized. Thank you. Okay. David?
Thank you. You know, a lot that has been said, it was said at this table too. I'll give you the bottom line numbers before some details, but there was 2 people who, and these were all leaning. You know, there were pluses and minuses to all 3 of them, and really good pluses and some serious minuses on all 3 of them. So there were 2 people who were leaning towards the status quo, 3 people who were leaning towards the downtown emphasis, and 3 that were leaning towards the Washington corridor. But there were about 5 or maybe 6 that really liked the combination of the downtown corridor, the Washington corridor and the downtown emphasis. So I found that really interesting near the end there too. There was a lot of, multi-story buildings in the downtown. There was a lot of talk about that early on, about them not going too high, losing the rural character and making it more of an urban feel rather than a rural feel. But I think most of us saw some benefits in additional density in downtown for the walkability and livability portion of it. But along with that comes some of the things you were talking about losing, in terms of traffic and rural look and that sort of thing. And parking was an issue there too. The Washington, let's see, healthcare came up a couple of times, especially urgent care. And that seemed to fit well with the Washington corridor option, because there's always some stuff already on the west side of Sequim. One of the points that was brought up by one member was that it seemed like the eastern part of Sequim, which would be from Sequim Avenue East, seemed to have, if you're just looking at it objectively, seem to have the most family-friendly kind of look. The houses are near places to shop, yet they're near parks, which were mentioned here, even in Pioneer Park, and that added to the family feel. Whereas the west end of Sequim seemed more like a shopping area or something like that, with less of the family-friendly look about it. What did I miss? Nothing. I got everything.
Downtown discussion. I think that's, I don't know, we haven't heard from everybody yet, but I think that's something that is really going to have to emerge as a strong component of this plan, with recognizing the unique role that downtown is. And that even if we might start looking at some of those other alternatives, 3 types of models, making sure that they are not designed to supplant downtown or replace them. And I think your comments about a character are good to hear about too. So thank you very much.
That was one of the comments I did forget. The downtown area the mom and pop store feel and that rural character feel. Really, it's difficult for mom and pop businesses to make it in winter time in this area. So there's got to be some kind of hybrid that allows we didn't really figure it out, but there's got to be some kind of hybrid businesses downtown as well as just local niche shops, I guess is the best way to say it.
Okay, table two.
Thank you. Okay, so we had, we looked at all three alternatives and we had a couple points that came up that were important, throughout the whole theme of this discussion. One was, how do we maintain the small town feel and the uniqueness of Sequim for those of us that have lived here a long time and those of us that have moved here because of the small town feel? How do we continue to create housing and walkability and bike transportation and to retail and to medical services? Medical services were a big priority. And then creating diversified housing. So workforce housing, low-income housing, you know, housing at a little bit of a higher level, but how do we, you know, kind of integrate all of that? And then more diversified retail, like Jeff was talking about, like how do we transgress just the small mom and pop, you know, businesses that are Tuesday through Saturday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And so we really felt that a combo between option 2 and 3 would possibly be the best fit. Something comprehensive. What kind of ruled us out with option 1 was, even though the infrastructure is already in place, if we continue going the status quo, but we don't feel that it would really allow for the growth that we would need moving forward 10 or 20 years to be able to support, you know, like young families to grow here, blue collar workers, businesses to come in, medical workers, teachers. So we felt that we needed to change a little bit, and we felt that scenario 2 and 3 would provide quite a bit of advantage. But some of the opportunities with that is that there is no parking in downtown. The price of housing and commercial would go up, and the congestion would go up if we just stuck, you know, in our lane with option 2. So how do we create a more dense downtown so that people gravitate to downtown? They want to live there, they want to work there. It's very vibrant. And so how do we, you know, how do we provide retail where it's mom and pop during the day and we have a vibrant nightlife? Do we have downtown space for, you know, for venues and gatherings? And, but we felt that couldn't be the only solution. And that option 3 paired with option 2 would allow opportunities for more diversified zoning, more mixed use residents and businesses. It would also allow for a little bit more affordability and a little bit more, you know, an ease in transportation. So you could have, you know, a node on the east side of town where somebody could live and ride their bike to the grocery store and a restaurant and take their kids to daycare. You know, and then you could also have that on the west side, and there would be more access to medical treatments if it was kind of more diversified. Some of the things that we saw, am I missing anything, guys?
Education.
I think transportation is key. Changing our thinking about everybody having to drive and park a car, please. We're in a new era. We need to think about public transportation, like a shuttle bus that will go up and down Washington Street, so people don't have to park. I think that's really, really, really important.
So better infrastructure with transportation throughout the city.
Making it easier.
Okay.
let's see, so how do we make sure this works? One of the biggest things that came up is really kind of education and, getting the news out, more information to the public.
Social media.
It was brought to the table that not everybody reads the newspaper, that we could have more of a presence on social media as far as just information about meetings. It doesn't have to be an in-depth, analysis, but information about meetings. How do we have more engagement? An example was meeting you at the farmer's market. So how does the city reach more residents? The city newsletter, getting more of that information out so people can come and participate. And let's see, and then what else do we want to keep in mind? That the architecture and that the spirit and the vibe of this small town, how do we grow and integrate these changes while also keeping the uniqueness that we all love so much here in the community? So, there you go, table 2.
I've been waiting for someone to bring up transportation, so thank you. It was really the thing that was the primary genesis of alternative 3 was finding a way that we could space the levels of development intensity to coincide with a good interval for bus stops. So thank you.
As a person without a car, I appreciate that.
Okay, so let's see, how about table 3? You thought with table 1 would be the first, huh?
I just think I won't have to say very much for time.
Okay, we are a group that also had a mix of thoughts about which alternatives seemed best. We had 2 that supported status quo, 1 supported the Washington corridor, 2 supported a downtown emphasis, and 2 didn't really care for any of them. Okay, so with that, status quo, mixed use downtown is a real strength that we currently have. Weakness, it won't solve our housing demand, and it could lead to more expensive housing, as we're currently seeing. Focus on the big box is considered a weakness. And opportunities, planned use resort adds business demand. And a threat could be planned resort will require more infrastructure. And we go to the downtown emphasis, where the focus on density is considered a real strength in downtown. Didn't identify any weaknesses, but we've got a number of opportunities. We must have good design standards to maintain the character of our community. There's a real opportunity there and something we talked a lot about. A need for a theme for the downtown area that would fit Sequim. And make the nodes for higher density in downtown. So that the idea of that downtown node, I guess, is having higher density is looked at as an opportunity. Challenges or threats could be parking challenges, loss of character potential with more density. Okay, so it's all, you hear the design standard already, that how important that would be to having that density work. Okay, Washington corridor. We didn't identify any strengths, but some of us really liked, the corridor. But anyway, let's see. Weaknesses, need separate uses to be compatible. So in other words, there was real concern that if you put uses all together, that they must be compatible. In other words, don't put industrial next to houses, that kind of thing. Spread demand for transportation, spreading out could create a greater demand for transportation and it could cost more. More dollars, it could cost more and possible congestion. That's what it is. Okay, but the opportunities, quite a number. Opportunity for different types of industry and business when we have the different nodes. The nodes, make nodes for higher density. So I think that was an ideal plan, and that could be a real opportunity to have more nodes. Transit is definitely an opportunity there. Need high density residential in those nodes. Opportunity to redevelop low quality housing that currently exists. So we talked a bit about that, is that we actually have a fair amount of low quality housing. we're not talking low income necessarily, but making sure that whatever income it is, that it's a high quality and not low. Let's see, and resort designation could be a real opportunity by adding business. But the threat is that none of this works without good design standards. Let's see, so then, how do we make sure this works? We have design standards. Design based on theme, make sure we have adequate infrastructure, adequate public outreach and input, adequate services, medical and other services, good quality schools to attract people to the area. We need to make sure it works by addressing climate issues. We don't have maybe as much impact that we're seeing around the country, but we are also impacted by climate, so we better be addressing them here through the process. An opportunity to make sure it works is pedestrian and biking options, and it's important to have the connectivity. Parks and green space are also very important, and a mix of businesses to support our tax base. Okay, biggest obstacle standing in the way: money, parking, Highway 101. Good planning is a must. Access, transportation, and other infrastructure can be a barrier because they all need to be adequate. And another obstacle is leadership to make it happen over the 20-year period. Okay. What else should we keep in mind? Let's keep in mind low-income housing for seniors and others, a range of senior housing options, not a lot of range right now. And so that could be a real possibility. We need knowledgeable decision makers all through the process, and invite young people into the process. Let's go to them. Let's go to the schools and talk to them now about this process, or let's go figure out what the kids are, because you know what? Some of us might not be here in 20 years, and this is really their plan, right? So inviting the young people now. Addressing homelessness is something we need to keep in mind. We need to keep quality schools to support development. We need social services to support all of this as well. And recognize that the resort designation can generate income. Could be a real good opportunity for this community business. That's it.
Thank you very much. I'm really grooving on the nuance. Okay, table one, take us home.
Okay. So a lot of what all the other tables said. We came in as number 3 as our preferred scenario for a few reasons. Number one, I think the biggest threat being sprawl and infrastructure being a big enough threat that we felt that staying in status quo wasn't in our best interest 20 years from now. But for number 3, a lot of the things that we liked for the strengths was that it allows for a wider spread of parking. It also allows for more resiliency in different ways. So we don't know what's going to happen in 20 years, and we've had these options for different nodes of mixed use that we can kind of flex and bend as we need to. And then, yeah, easier to transition to, just because we're not trying to convert one central downtown area only. Some of the weakness we saw in that was, you know, always the threat is water, right? But green space, right? You talk about bringing families, it was mentioned, you know, we've got nicer options on the east side and the west side. Opportunities is, you know, have more integrated age development of housing, so not just senior, just families, mix it up. And then it would be more attractive to families to have those kind of integrated spaces. We also have an opportunity with this to encourage more innovative building techniques and materials. I want to point out there's, you know, we need to look towards climate and cost and materials and what we can do moving forward. And unify city visuals with nice looking development. So talk about being very intentional. So if we go to these nodes, then we feel it'll be more successful. We can make sure it works if the city has a plan. Like this, I think somebody mentioned it, this node might attract more medical, this might be more clothes shopping, this might be more family activities. And what do we want that to look like? What are the beautification standards that we can build into our policies to make sure that when we build those nodes, they don't just look, they have the swim when we build, they're pretty here.
threats to number three we saw was that these types of node developments typically take big money developers. And then I'll increase the traffic and decrease the rural build potentially. And then also anytime you build up kind of city centers, you can increase some of the challenges with homeless encampment, so we need a plan to help our homeless population and something like that. How can we make sure it works? Have a good plan to entice developers, expand medical nodes, better schools. Look at some of the other towns that have kind of touristy downtowns, but local uptowns, those kind of things. Include parking requirements with any of these zoning changes. One of the biggest obstacles is, focusing on family forward could put our tourism industry more at risk, but so then how do we entice more industry so that we have people to fill these spaces, right? So that they're not just empty. Medical to support a growing population, that was a common theme. Attracting developers, and making sure we're developing the type of living spaces that are conducive to families and getting home loans and things like that. I think some of the new developments going in, manufactured homes on land you don't own, it's really hard for families to qualify for that. So that's not going to be a good 20-year plan side. What else should we keep in mind? Resort zone. I think a lot of people said that there could be a lot of money benefit there, which could, just definitely into agricultural rural farm and beautification standards. So yeah, I think that's it. Anything else? Good.
I did not know what to expect. Really jazzed. I'm looking forward to going through your worksheets and coming back to you with something that I hope is an honest representation of what you told us tonight. So stay tuned. We will have tomorrow, I'm facilitating a housing intensive focus group. I think every table talked to some degree about making housing more available and more affordable. So we're working on that. We will be making regular updates to the planning commission. We will come back. I don't yet have a date, but we will come back in the next several months with a preferred direction. So we'll consolidate what you told us today into a set of policy initiatives. You can see what's going to stay the same, what might likely change, so that we can advance our way into this next 20-year period. We will take a look after we agree on those policy moves. We'll put together a dance card of things to do over the next 5 years or so, and we'll get into developing prioritizing what we need to do first. So along the way, I think many of the tables talked about responsible implementation of the promises the plan makes. So that workshop is about delivering. And then we'll go into the hearings process with the planning commission and the council. We should be done before the end of next year. So stay tuned and hit the website. So thank you all very, very much. Everything that you wrote on tonight, leave on your tables. We'll pick it up and that'll become part of our record. So again, thank you for your listening.
Well, thank you for putting this together and allowing us to.